here. This is the Minister of Youth class. I'm Artemesia Volterra. I am the current Middle Kingdom Minister of Youth. Previously, before this, I was the Page School Dean, and I've been a Minister of Youth for many years now. One of the things that I find helpful with the Minister of Youth in general, I'm going to share my screen real quick and we're going to see how this works, is if you go to the Middle Kingdom website, a lot of the information that you would need that I'm going to cover in this class, or if you're looking for helpful stuff, is there. No, there it is. Okay, so here on the Kingdom website, you can see, so I'm right there on the picture. I had them add a contact me section here so people can easily ask a question and it will go to my youth email. And then when we scroll down, we can see different things. The reporting schedules are there. And then we have different stuff on waivers and background checks. All the different deputies are there. And then there's some useful links over here that you can click on to do with youth combat, rapier, page school, to go to the documents and forms that we'll be talking about as well. Go back to just here. So that's always a good place to go to if you are looking for information to do with youth. So first, I had just a general question. Why do you think it's important that we have ministers of youth for the Middle Kingdom or for the society in general?
Well, I can answer why I think. That doesn't mean it's right, but to me, if we want our organization to persist, we have to at least keep a track with the amount of people that either leave or get, pass away, whatever reason they depart. We have to at least maintain that just to keep up. And one of the easiest ways is for the youth, but folks that are parents, if we want families to come in, you have to have things to keep the children occupied and keep them part of that. And you could develop them, they're going to be adults, so start then. That would be my thought.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So pretty much exactly that though. We want the youth to be part of our society. It is important that we have the ministers of youth so that we can make sure that the youth are more included in what we do. So they're not just an afterthought when you're planning events or you're doing classes at your local group. We want to make sure that we try to keep these youth through adulthood so they can be our future leaders, because we're all not going to be around forever. So we need to have someone who can continue the path of the SCA and be leaders in the future or just enjoy it in the future. So at the very basic of what a minister of youth does, it is a position to encourage participation and inclusion of the youth in the SCA while they're learning about different time periods that we represent, and they're also learning about our organization. And as youth officers, we should encourage, organize, teach classes, as well as ensure that the policies of the society are being followed. There's a variety of different offices that you could have. There's a local one, so that's for like cantons or shires. You could be a baronial youth officer. We have regional, there's the Kingdom youth officer. There's also an at-large, so anyone could be an at-large officer. We also have the Page School Dean, and then we have youth marshals. So you might wonder, how do I get to be in those positions? For the local, baronial, and shire, typically those positions are a voted-in position or an appointed position by your group. Regionals, you would apply for the position to the Kingdom Minister of Youth, and then for the Kingdom one, and for the Page School Dean, you would apply to Kingdom Seneschal. At large, anyone can be that, so that is involved with turning in a form and getting a background check done. In terms of youth rapier and youth armored marshals, all of those fall under the marshal side of the SCA. So if you have any questions that pertain to those specifically, you're going to want to go to the Kingdom Youth Rapier Marshal or the Kingdom Youth Armored Marshal, which I am not good with names. So the Rapier one, I think it's pronounced Zhao, and I'm not even going to try the full name. And
Zhao, known as Velvet, is just fine.
there we go, yes. And then the armored one right now is Angus Robertson. So those are two people that you can contact if you have any questions pertaining to the marshal side of youth. So for all of the offices, you do need to be a paid member. You have to turn in a change of officer form, and that part is really important because that lets us know that, like, if you want to be an at-large, we need to know to be able to add you onto the portal and so that we can keep track of you. You also need to be background checked, and if you're not background checked when you fill out your change of office form, that's when we would get that going so that you can be background checked. So in terms of a background check, who needs it? Well, all the people that deal with the youth that are in an officer position would need it. So when you're filling out the form, it's going to ask what you're going for. So if you're going for Minister of Youth, a Minister of Youth at Large, Rapier, Rapier at Large, Armored, Armored at Large. Those are the categories you would put down. If you don't fit into one of those categories, you would be Minister of Youth at Large. And that way we have a way to track you. Let me see if there's anything else in terms of that. And for the background checks, we actually formed not too long ago information on how you do that. Let me share my screen real quick, and I will show you where that is located so that if you ever need to go to that, you can. So here in the Library of Documents, this is actually in the Youth tab, and you can also search for it as well. There's background check procedures. We laid out the flow of what you do or how you get a background check. Very important to turn in that initial change of officer form, and that way that change of officer form, if you're not already background checked, that officer who you're turning it into can turn it into the background check deputy, and they can start the process rolling, because then the background check deputy is going to take over. They're going to be contacting you to get some information and to fill out some different forms that just pertain to the background checked information. She is wonderful, and she takes care of all of that, and she does all the tracking on that. It's really not too difficult. I think currently it's about maybe 2-3 weeks, so it's really not that long. I know in the past it was taking a little bit longer, but I think we have gotten a nice flow down so that if somebody is going for a background check, for the most part, it's not taking that long. I would say a month at the most. The Canadian checks do take longer because those are a little bit different procedures. And so if you happen to be one of those people, the background check officer will go over exactly what you have to do. Let me stop screen sharing for a second. Background checks, they're good for 2 years. And when it is close to expiring, the background check deputy will notify you so that you can get your renewal in before your 2 years is up, so that if you're an officer, you're never lapsing in that time. One thing the society has done recently is if your membership lapse, they remove you from the background check list. And so you will no longer appear on that. So that's very important to remember, because if you're an officer and oops, you forgot to pay your membership dues on time, you are no longer going to be background checked. So if for some reason you disappear off at the portal and you're like, I can't file my report. Okay, one thing to remember is if your membership lapses, contact people who need to know that, so that we know that you're working on getting that back up again, so that we can get you back into the portal when you are background checked again. Let me see if there's any questions in terms of background checks.
is it harder for somebody like, I know, like if you work for the government or the military, they have their whole procedure of like, I have to do a release of information if I want my military records to be viewed, searched, checked by other people. Is that add more to the process, or is that kind of not an issue for what they're checking?
I know that there are people who have had high security positions before that are background checked. So I'm guessing they probably don't go super deep into that stuff. That's just my guess though. That would be a wonderful question. If you are in that position, I would say reach out to the background check deputy, and then that person would be able to contact people on the society level to find out what needs to be done. So if your background check were held up in any certain spot,
it's not so much like it's going to be a big holdup. It's just that like the Army has their whole system of regulations that they've got what's called an ROI form. And if you want anybody to be able to see anything, you have to fill out a form and designate that that you have the right to release of information to them is
Okay.
all that you're doing. And, you know, like if you guys are just checking, we just want to know if it's this person's name and blah, 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 and if they've ever gotten in trouble. And I'm assuming that's kind of what they're checking. It's not a big deal. It's just they won't send it to anybody unless you fill that out.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I would say I can answer some of it because I was in office earlier in the background check process being implemented. They're pretty much just checking for criminal convictions.
Yeah, I figured
So
as much.
I've not had anybody run into a problem other than if you have a really common name that can sometimes slow it down because they have trouble discerning whether you're that person or not.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
One thing to remember too, it's a question that we get asked often. They'll say, well, I already have my background check done through my school system because I'm a teacher, or whatever the case may be. That's great, but we cannot use that background check. We do have to go through our society. It would be the same thing of they can't use our background check just like we can't use their background check. Each place has to have their own in order for you to be covered with it.
I'm assuming it's just we're doing our own due diligence. We're not taking, you know, if we took one person's form, we'd have to take everybody's form or offend somebody, and we just take nobody's.
I can comment on that too.
Oh, go ahead.
Want. The other thing is it's to ensure privacy. Basically, all we get back from the background check company is pass or fail. So it is to keep your information private. That way, nobody in the SCA ever sees if you do fail what those convictions were or anything. So we couldn't take somebody else's check because basically it could expose us to information that we don't necessarily want to give everyone access to.
Background checks, they are updated once a month, and Kingdom gets sent a new list of who has been approved. So that's when we can go through our different stuff and make sure that the portal's updated. And when the background check deputy gets that information, she then contacts everyone new who's on that list and says, you know, congratulations. You also get something in the mail that says, congratulations, you have passed your background check and that it's good. It says the date that it starts at, and it says it's good for 2 years. So you get multiple ways to let you know that you've passed the background check. Next thing I want to talk about is reporting. Reporting is done through the Mid-Realm portal. And there are as I was showing you at the beginning, there's quarterly reports, and I do not make everybody turn in a quarterly report. Everyone except for the at-large officers. Because if you're not using that at-large office status, there's not really a reason to turn in the report. If you're a baronial, if you're a canton or a shire one, you should definitely be turning in your quarterly reports. And obviously if you're a regional, you should as well. But the at-large officers, there's no reason for me to have you turn it in if you didn't utilize it. If you did use it, you definitely should turn it in. So for instance, if you are in charge of a youth activity at an event and you're an at-large officer, you would want to turn in a report. But let's say you're just there to fulfill the 2 deep rule for adults, but you're not the person in charge, somebody else is. You wouldn't be filling out the report, that other person who's in charge would be filling out the report. If for any reason you find that you don't have access to the reporting on the portal, you'd want to contact me at the youth@midrealm.org email, and then we can look into that and figure out why. Any questions on that stuff? So we have a lot of policies concerning youth, and all of those policies are in the Society Essentials Handbook. So when things change on a Society Essentials Handbook for the policies of youth, that's when all of us abide by them as well. In terms of youth supervision, and some of this stuff I'm going to read directly from the handbook just because that way it's black and white and everyone knows the exact rules. So responsibility for youth supervision. Parents or guardians of minors shall have ultimate responsibility for the welfare and behavior of their children at all times. It's the responsibility of the adult who brings the minor to the event to ensure that the minor is safe and not in danger. Any questions on that one? That one's pretty straightforward. Parents are in charge, or if it is somebody else who is bringing the child, they are the person in charge. And then we do have medical authorizations for minors. So at events or activities in which youth participate in any way, participating minors either need to have a parent or legal guardian present at the event or activity, or a temporary guardian present in possession of a proper executed medical authorization form for minors. And this medical authorization form must designate the adult present at the event or activity as able to authorize medical treatment in case of an emergency. It's a form of temporary guardianship. So for those waivers,
let me ask you a question, Artemesia.
Sure.
Let's say that somebody, let's say it's their parent, or I don't care, guardian. Do they need to be, you know, within 60 feet of them, or can they be just as long as they're on the event site and are reachable? That's satisfactory. What proximity do they need to be with, you know, to the child?
So that's going to go back up to that first rule that I read, where the adult is in charge and they need to make sure the minor is safe and not in danger. There is no longer a limit for the rule of how far or how close they need to be to their child.
So as long as the parent's comfortable and can exercise proper control in their own judgment, we're happy with that?
The parent is in charge.
Okay.
Now, in terms of the marshal side, that might be totally different. So you'd want to consult the youth marshal in terms of that. For the minor waivers, if the youth is an SCA member, so if they have a blue card, then a minor waiver is not required for participation in non-combat activities. Now, sites can still require you to fill one out when you get to the gate, because some places say any youth who's here needs to have one of these signed here, and it needs to be in this stack. That is totally up to the site and up to the autocrat and the events, how they want to run that, but they are not required to sign one if they do have that blue card. If a minor does not have a blue card or is participating in combat activities, a minor waiver must be signed by the legal guardian or the parent. The minor waivers for non-SCA members are retained by Troll. Minor waivers for combat is retained by the minister of the list. And these are the minor waivers that, and they have met gate and everything for people to sign. So if a minor wants to attend an event with an adult that is not their parent or legal guardian, the parent legal guardian needs to complete a proper executed medical authorization form. So these do vary by state on what they require. And these were just last reviewed May of this year. So for Indiana and Canada, it has to be notarized to make it valid. For Iowa, Kentucky, Michigan, and Ohio, you either need to have 2 witnesses when it's signed, or it needs to be notarized. And for Illinois, you need to have 1 witness, or it can be notarized. So those are a little bit different of what we had in the past. It used to be, a lot of them fell under the 1 witness or notarization, and a lot more are getting a bit stricter with what you need to have. So if you do fill out that medical authorization form, you actually have to have 3 copies. The youth should always have a copy. So if they're wandering around site and someone needs to get a hold of the parent or guardian that is, or the guardian that is there with them who is in charge of them, that would be on that. If, let's see, the temporary guardian has to have a copy, and then the parent should have a copy. So there should be 3 forms, 3 copies of the same form. If there's no expiration date on the form, the authorization will remain in effect and can be used for future events. So if someone who typically brings your kid along with them to events, you can fill out the forms and then save them for the next event if they're going to be, you know, taking the kid along again. That way you're not constantly filling out these forms time and time again. And it can be used until the parent legal guardian revokes the authority through a written statement. So any question on any of the medical authorization stuff? All right. So a little into youth activity supervision. All official or published SCA youth activities have to have 1 background check adult member who acts as the official coordinator for the SCA youth activity. And then there also needs to be, we have to follow the 2 deep rule. So the 2 deep rule says that there has to be a minimum of 2 adults present. They have to be at or above the age of the legal majority, so 18. And they have to be unrelated to one another by blood, marriage, or personal relationship. One of these 2 adults could be the person also acting as the official coordinator of the activities as well. Any questions on that part?
So if we had, let's say we're at the Barony and Middle Marches and they're holding an event. So I can take our baronial minister of youth that's warranted and has a background check. Can any other legal adult that's not related to that person, not married to the minister of youth for the barony, can they be the second person? Do they have any other requirements that they need to have they don't have to have a background check or anything? They can just be a volunteer who acts in that capacity as long as they meet the non-nepotism kind of rule. Yeah?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. All right, so now I want to talk a little bit about youth activities at events, just to give people a few different ideas and information on what they can do. There are multiple different ways you can run youth activities. I just wanted to go over a few of those with you. So it's pretty much up to however that event wants to run it. You could require parents have to be present, or you can say parents don't have to be present. Obviously, if parents aren't there, you definitely have to follow, make sure that there's the 2 adults. If the parent is there and the person in charge is there, that's 2 adults. So sometimes if we have a really hard time getting volunteers, they'll say the parent has to stay because maybe we weren't able to get volunteers, but we still want to have a youth point open. And so that's one of the ways that we can still have that. Obviously, it's not as good because then the parents have to come along with them as well. And it kind of makes them, especially if it's like a 10-year-old, they may not want to hang out with mom and dad in there, or there might be other things that are going on that they want to, that the parents want to see or want to be involved with. So you can have a youth point. So an area where people can come and go as they please throughout the day. Activities could be in the room. That one I don't see quite as often. When I first joined the SCA, that's pretty much what I saw, where it was a room, it was tucked back away somewhere out of the way, and it had a bunch of toys in there, and essentially kids kind of just went in there and played. I don't really prefer that one. I don't think it involves our youth as much as we can. So another way that you can do it is you can have scheduled classes. I like this way a lot because you have a set start time, a set end time. Now, I wouldn't recommend that your classes go as long as adult classes, because you're probably not, unless they're like teenagers, you're not going to keep their attention for the, you know, hour or however long the class is. So maybe a shorter time frame, but then too, it's a, okay, who, you know, everybody is here gathered at the table for this class. We do the class ends. And then if there's another class after it, they could stay. But if that class is done, that's all you're in charge of. It is a wonderful way if you have adults that might be nervous to teach for other adults. Sometimes you can get them to teach the youth classes because they find it a little less, they aren't necessarily going to have a Laurel sitting in on their class or a Pelican sitting on their class. Whereas if they're teaching adult class, they definitely could. And so sometimes they feel a little less nervous if they're teaching to the kids than they are to the adult. It kind of gives them a run through before they step up to the adult class. So for the schedule of classes, another thing you could do is you could either have it taught by the adult, or you can ask youth to teach classes too. This is a great way to get them involved. And these kids, I've seen the kids, especially at the It Takes My Child to Raise a Village, that's what it's called. The kids teaching these classes are amazing. I mean, they could be teaching to adults, they're so good. And so that is one way that you can definitely utilize the youth that are already around. And let's see. So sometimes you might say, okay, it's a different room for the youth class that is in the same area as the adult classes. Or if it's like a big, huge area and there's just different tables, it could be just a different table. The one thing to keep in mind with that, though, is if you're going to have a noisy class, you may not want to have it by the adult classes, because then it's going to interfere with their classes. So there's a variety of different class ideas you can do. If you do something outside, you might be able to incorporate kids running around a little bit to get their energy out a bit. I think I have seen like a red light, green light with heraldry in the past. You could do some of the same arts that the adults are doing, but you might simplify it a little bit with materials that are easier for youth to handle. I definitely recommend that it is a variety of things. So you don't want to just sit there and lecture to kids and have, you know, history and information. That probably is not going to go over very well with the kids unless it's a subject that they are going to just stick with the entire time. So try to have it a little bit, maybe interactive a little bit, ask some questions, maybe a little bit on history, a tiny bit of the lecture, and then hands-on is really going to be good for them, and to have a mix of all of that stuff, so to make the class a little bit more interesting. Any questions or comments in terms of classes? So for events, another idea, sometimes we have a really hard time getting volunteers. or getting people to be able to teach for the youth. So one of the ideas that I had are grab bags. Grab bags are a way that you could set them up at a table. The youth can come along, pick them up. They can take them with them. And wherever they are on site, if they're hanging out with mom or dad or, you know, on the list field or wherever they happen to be, they can sit there and do the activity. So I have some of those here, and you can do a variety of ages. So this one is just a piece of cardboard that I have felt on. And so this is for obviously someone very young. So I cut out different things and they can put the felt board on there, and there's a little dragon and different things like that. So they can play and make all different, there's a little knight and a horse, different stuff like that. So this could be for someone very young. And then you can have a variety of them. One really good thing to do is, and I put them in Ziploc bags, one, because then you're not spending a ton of money. Yes, it definitely would look much nicer in a different bag, but the lovely thing for parents of the Ziploc bag is it closes. So if you have little pieces or parts, they're not all over your vehicle when you come home from the event. So the great thing is everything fits in the bag. Anything that you need for this activity is all in the bag for you. So for this one, this is the Game of the Goose. So it has the board in here. It has the instructions down at the bottom. And then also included in here are the dice that you would need. And then there's all these little different, I don't know if you can see them, there's all these different little pieces, just stuff that I had laying around the house that would be good game pieces, a variety of different ones so that they can keep track of who they are. But it's all together. That way they can find another kid at the site and say, hey, want to play a game? And they can play their game. And then when they're done, they can zip it up. And this is something that could then be tossed in their bag no matter what event they go to, so they can use it over and over again. But games are definitely a good one. So this one here is Fox and Geese. Now for this one, you need multiple things. And I didn't want to put, and you need 2 different colors for this one too. And so I was like, okay, well, what is a good way that I'm not going to spend a lot of money to make these bags? So what I did was I went to the dollar store and I got a bag of beans. This is not recommended, obviously, for little kids because we don't want them eating these. But for the older kids, there's 2 different color beans I got. And so I put those into a bag, and I always made sure too, if you're putting things in the bag, don't do the exact amount, do a few extra. They're going to lose pieces, and you don't want them to then get upset and mom and dad have to deal with that. So extra pieces, very important. I mean, I bought a huge bag of beans and barely used any. So games are a wonderful way to do that. Other things that I have found was I went on the internet and I found a bunch of different origami. And so one, I would have the instructions on one sheet of how to fold it. And I pre-cut it so it was the size that they needed. And there's, I think, like 5 different origami instructions in the paper here so they can fold it and make stuff. And then for some of the older kids, this one is to make a little mouse. Again, everything's in here. You're obviously not going to want this for a younger kid because it does have a needle in it. So age appropriate, definitely, because we don't want any of the kids getting hurt, but it has all the different things that they might need, including the instructions. I have different things like I have weaving boards that I've made. So for the very young, I try to stay away from things like coloring. However, for the younger kids, it's definitely something that they can do. So what I do is obviously some crayons, but then I try to find different things that have a medieval theme to them, or I think Dover, I think that's the free one. There's a bunch of different free ones out there that you can grab images that are medieval related, and you could print them off onto paper and then have them available for little baggies like that so kids can do some coloring. I mean, everything from that's making a posy flower to, that is embroidery. So that's obviously for a little bit older possibly. And then there's Kumihimo too. So instead of using the boards that cost a lot of money, you can definitely make them out of cardboard. I always try to find ways to make it so that, because a lot of times you're doing this out of your own pocket. So I try to do it and find ways to make it cheap so I'm not spending a ton of money. In terms of that too, one thing I also recommend is that if you're going to be in charge of youth activities, ask for a little bit of a budget, because I mean, quite honestly, all the other places, if they're giving away something for a tournament, or they're going to have a budget and they're not expected to necessarily get it out of their own pocket. Youth shouldn't either. And so we shouldn't, you know, expect youth ministers to be getting out of their own pocket every single time they teach a class. So ask for a budget from the autocrat. You know, it doesn't have to be anything big, because you can find most of these supplies at the dollar store. But that way you're not spending your own money. But those are the grab bags. The great thing about that is if I don't have the volunteers or have the people to run an actual youth point, this is a wonderful way to still get kids involved. It teaches them about the different, few of the different arts, and it allows them to sometimes bring it to different events with them, not just that event. Another big thing too that a lot of the groups do is they'll do scavenger hunts. There are many different ways that you can do scavenger hunts. You could do the simple way where, you know, you're putting down, go and find someone who has a white belt, and maybe you're asking them a question, or maybe you're just finding that person and putting their name. You could do for, I think it was a crown or a, one of the big tournaments or something like that. I did one for Baronese heraldry, and they had to go find different baronies, because for like a crown, most of the time the baron and baroness, or at least all the baronies, are represented normally, so they can find different things like that. You also could do ones where you give them a clue and they have to solve the clue to get to the next clue. You could have a prize at the end. So if they had a sheet of paper and they were filling out different names, you could say, okay, at the end of the day, meet me at this time, right before court or at the back of court. And if you give me the paper, I will give you a prize. Or you could say, if it's the clues where they have to solve it, you could, along the way of solving the clue and doing whatever path they have, you could have prizes along the way. So they're gathering prizes as they're solving their clues. That's always a fun one, but it's way more involved. One other thing I like to have, any questions on scavenger hunts at all? That one's pretty straightforward. Service opportunities. I love to make sure that there is some sort of service opportunity for youth to be able to do. I mean, obviously youth can be guards, or they, I see youth signing up to retain, but there's other things that you can do too, like if you're in charge of youth activities, one of the cool things that we've done in the past is, let's say it's a hot day out. I've done this twice for Baron Wars. One time we did it as a fundraiser for the youth, and then the other time we just did it in general and gave them away, is ice pops. So I found a way to keep the ice pops cold, and when the fighters were all hot and sweaty, we went out with ice pops, and tons of us, we had a bunch of adults with us. It wasn't just, you know, 2 or 3 of us, there was a ton. And the adults had the scissors, and we cut off the tops for them, and they went out and they handed them to people. Everybody loved it. When we did it as a fundraiser, again, everyone loved it. And for that, we were raising money so that the youth could get a set of loaner gear for youth rapier. And so the cool thing about that too is the adults would be like, well, what are you raising money for? And once they told them, then they're like, okay, I don't want the ice puffs, but here, take money. Go get stuff for the youth. So I mean, it's nice because it's different ways to get the adults involved, and they pay a little bit more attention to the youth then and how they are valuable within our society. But there's tons and tons of different youth service opportunities that the youth can do and be involved with. For the Marshall side of it, one thing I recommend is asking them if they could be next to the adult list. It's really good for the adults to see the youth and the youth to see the adults. And sometimes the marshals will work together where when the adults are on a break, the youth sometimes go over and they're in the adult area and the adults can watch, or they can get their sparring done then with the youth, their authorizations for that. So those are always nice ways to involve the youth a little bit more. In terms of ANS, besides classes, you can also have a youth competition that is either alongside the adults, or if you don't have that, you can always encourage the youth to participate in the adult one. There's nothing that says the youth cannot enter something into the adult one. It's just another way that we can incorporate them into the SCA even more. Essentially what I do is, like if I were in charge of youth activities at an event, I would look at every section that we have and I would try to figure out a way that we can incorporate the youth into that. So like even with thrown weapons and archery, can we have some sort of small competition for the youth or something? Even if it's in terms of, you know, can we have the youth pick a fighter and that's their fighter and incorporate it into some sort of tourney or something like that that the adults are already doing. It just gets them more involved in what is going on instead of them being the afterthought or being shoved in a corner. And speaking of being shoved in a corner, so one of the things I don't like about the youth point is being shoved in the corner because they are away from the activities and people can't see what's going on. If you're having a youth point or youth activities, I prefer if they're more in the center, where there is a lot of people around, different stuff going on. When you have parents don't necessarily know that there's youth activities going on. So if you have them more in the center, they may walk by it and go, oh, what are they doing? There's all these kids gathered around there. And they can then participate, their kids can participate as well. Any questions on that in terms of youth at events?
Yeah, I've got a question for you.
Sure.
Do we have like, okay, people who that are doing the stuff, they know what works, or at least what worked for them and what doesn't. Do we have, is there a Facebook group or is there a clearinghouse where everybody has put their ideas? Hey, I'd like to report that this worked really well. We did this last weekend and this works well if you do this, but you should be cautioned about this or that, you know, that kind of sort of anecdotal evidence. Do we have anything like that?
There are a few different Facebook groups out there. There's society ones, but then there's also ones that we have for mid-realm, and they're not very active, but definitely people get on there every once in a while and will tell about different things that work really well, or will share ideas, information. So yeah, I mean, there's stuff out there, they're just not necessarily used. A lot of it tends to be trial and error from different youth ministers of what worked, what didn't work.
What do you think, like, you know, like what would work at Penzic doesn't necessarily work in your small event, you know, a local event where you're only going to have 80 people or whatever because of the numbers involved, and you wouldn't need to, you know, but stuff like that, if you could find somebody that's in a similar situation, it might be more applicable.
Oh, definitely. And some of the things, I have some resources coming up too that can also help people find some stuff that might be more geared towards what they have for their event or for their group in terms of size. So I'm going to move on to meetings. So incorporating youth at meetings, because we don't just want to think of youth in terms of events. Yes, definitely we want to do stuff for them there, but we want to incorporate them to all of the SCA and not just part of it. So definitely for meetings, one thing that you can do is giving them an area. So a lot of this I'm going to tell you about my own meeting site, because we have definitely incorporated youth a lot into what we do. We have a general area where there's a bunch of tables, and we're all in the same room, but off at the back there are a few tables that the youth normally congregate at, where we can see them, we can hear them. They're not, you know, horribly far away from us, but so we can kind of keep an eye if there's anything going on where they're getting a little too loud or crazy or anything like that. But it lets them get to know each other. So it's important for us as adults. We go to meetings, and yeah, maybe we have classes going on, but even when we go to events, a lot of the time is spent talking to people and forming connections, forming bonds. I think it's really important for youth to be able to get that opportunity too. And then they have a reason that they want to come back. A lot of the times in the SCA, even for us as adults, yeah, we may join because, hey, we like this cool thing, or, ooh, they're fighting over there, or whatever it may be. But the reasons that you stay tend to be the feelings that you get and the community that you have. So I want to make sure that the youth have that as well. And so they need to have that space and have that time to talk with other youth and to get to know them. So a few other things for meetings. Besides having the table section at where we meet at, we also have a very large gym that we have rapier going on, and we have heavy going on. We have different weeks normally that we're focused on one or the other. And the nice thing is when the rapier is going on, we also have a person that does youth rapier, so we can get the kids involved with that. But as people are starting to come in and everything, people are gathering and talking. We kind of let that be the time that the youth can go out into the gym and run around and be kids. They have energy. So if we try to just sit them at the back of the room the entire time, and we want them to be quiet and we want them to do whatever, yeah, that's not going to work. They're kids. That's just, unless they're teenagers and just want to hang out and chat, that's totally not going to work. So we give them the space, the opportunity to run around, be kids, be a little bit crazy for a little bit. Then we're like, okay, so they're going to start fighting. So kids got to go out. You're, welcome to watch, but you got to watch from, we put up barriers and stuff. You got to watch from behind the barrier so that it's safe. But this gives them a little bit of the energy to get out from the beginning of the meeting. We find that works very well. In terms of classes, when we have classes at my canton, we try to, one thing that we definitely do is we don't do any classes that the youth can't attend. Now, some of the classes, obviously, with like sewing and things like that, if they're younger, they're not necessarily going to be able to participate, but we never tell them that they can't participate. Conrad taught a class on coining. So the kids were like, that is so awesome. And they loved watching it and everything. Could they do every single step? No, but he let a few of them have that hammer, and they got to hammer some of those coins. And so they got to be involved. And then it was cool because then he gave some of the coins to the kids too, which obviously they loved. But definitely incorporating, there was one class I said, hey, can you teach this class? And she's like, yeah, but we're going to limit it, and it has to be this age or older. And I went, thank you, but I'm going to decline the class because we want to have it available. If the youth are there at our meetings, we want to make sure that they are involved. It kind of goes back to that parent thing too, where the parents are there at the meetings with them. So they should kind of have an eye on the youth and what they're doing. And it also goes back to it takes a village, where as your meetings grow, you're going to have probably tons of youth, tons of adults, and we kind of all look out for each other. So I definitely have had parents stop Thora, my youngest child, and it's like, okay, we're not going to do that one right now. Because kids will get away from their parents at times and try to get into something, and And most of us are more than happy to have you stop our kid and be like, calm. We're going to just redirect you over here now. Any questions in terms of meetings and youth? Oh, one other thing we do too is, so we tried to have one of the classes a month, something that the kids pick and that they're interested in specifically. It may not be kid-centered, but it's something that they want to learn about. I know that they requested something to do with cooking one time that we had someone teach. And the cooking classes they tend to love, especially if they can make their own thing or be involved in touching it. Yeah, in terms of COVID, that totally wouldn't work right now. But after all of this is over, it would be awesome to get back to that because they love touching things and getting all involved, especially half of them, if it involves getting messy and dirty, they love it. So.
Hey, Artemesia, do we have anyone that's doing content like right now? Like we could do stuff that we put up on YouTube, that somebody's doing stuff for the kids for them to do at home, just simple things that they could do with stuff that's already probably in their house, but like activities like that we could do and give something to help the parents keep their kids busy. Is there any interest in doing anything like that?
Kind of. We're going to touch a little bit on that in just a little bit. I'm going to share some links and stuff like that of things that I found that parents can go to. So we will get to that one definitely. Youth at demos. That's one thing I want to talk about too. So if the kids are a little bit older, I recommend ones that aren't really running around and being crazy, because obviously at demos, you're trying to entice people to come and talk. But if they're a little bit older, and if you can give them a game and have them sit down like at the front, but like off to the side a little bit, and they can sit there and play the game and have fun. It's awesome when a family walks up, because then the kids tend to gravitate towards the kids that are playing the game. And then the kids will all talk with each other. And the nice thing is for the parents is that their kids occupied. So they can actually spend the time to talk to the adults and learn about what the SCA is without having to be like, no, don't do this, don't do that, don't touch this. And it's wonderful to incorporate the kids in that way. It's also great because I'm a big advocate for getting families involved. And one of the wonderful ways I think that we can grow as a society is to try to get families. Because if I spend all of this energy in trying to get this one person and they have somebody else at home, but there's kids at home, and okay, I can get this person to come out to the event, but if I can get the whole family to come to a meeting and to come to events, that could be 4 people instead of 1 person. So I think it's just a better utilization of our time to incorporate the kids and make it welcoming for them as well. It also helps the parents, because then instead of the one parent going, okay, I get to go to the event this time, you stay at home with the kids and we'll switch next week, or whatever the case may be. The next point I wanted to touch on was Page School. So Middle Kingdom does have a Page School program. So what the Page School is, it's a program that's designed for the youth to learn about different aspects of the SCA so that they can find their place. And it gives them different goals that they can work on. They get coins and they get scrolls for completing different levels. Page School itself, it doesn't teach the class. It is a record keeping. And so it definitely involves having the parents turn in the different stuff that the kids do, and then the kids get recognition for that. At Bell Day, my own kids had gone up to get some scrolls because they had finished some levels. But it's really neat because when they get the recognition scrolls, we often ask for it to be at a court. And it's nice because then the kids get recognized and they're up there in front of the kingdom, and people kind of take to notice of, oh, look, the kids are really involved and they're doing things. You know, they're not just being loud at the back of the room. So let me show you. So Page School has their own page on Middle Kingdom site. Let me find you. There it is. So on Middle Kingdom site, there is a Page School. And so this will run through exactly, you know, how parents can sign up for it, how they can turn in different hours that the kids might do for different stuff. Here you can see different divisions that the kids are in. So it's for anyone under 18. And this is going to walk you through different information here on how to turn in stuff, how to be a mentor for that, different fundraiser things, different ways adults can help. That kind of gives you some information there. Any question on Page School?
Nope.
All right. So for Page School, obviously we recognize the youth in different ways for completing different levels. Besides Page School though, I think it's really important that we remember to recognize our youth, and we're submitting awards for them. The Kingdom does have youth awards that are out there, and I think every single one of the youth awards, I believe each one of them, they can get more than once. So especially we need to keep in mind that these youth, like my own kids, they're growing up in the SCA. So even though they may have gotten that award back when they were 6, okay, well, what if they're 14 now? Does that mean we're not going to give them the award again? No. If they're still doing stuff, we need to find ways to recognize the youth, because some of these kids have been in the SCA longer than, you know, some adults, and if they're highly involved with taking classes and everything, the amount of knowledge and learning that they have done, and or teaching that they have done even. But besides even awards, definitely if they're doing different things, make sure to say thank you to them. It goes a long way. For youth too, one thing that you can do is if you see them doing combat or doing rapier or doing something with ANS, you can always give them a little token. Kids love little tokens and different things that they can, that they are given. And that could be anything from, you know, maybe it's a little bead or whatever it may be. And so the last thing I wanted to show you was different resources that are out there. So I'm gonna share my screen and show you. I have a bunch of different screens up so that you can see there's different places you can go to that are already out there that you can get some information. So recently I had actually posted, let me see if it, oh, that one's not, oh, there we go. Okay, so I had posted this, and I had found that besides Mid-Realm, there are many different kingdoms out there that have different classes available virtually. They also have different YouTubes that you can go to take the classes. And as long as it doesn't say adult only, the youth can take the class. So those are definitely different ways that kids can take classes and do stuff online virtually. In the digital Alexandria, there is actually a Pompeii children's class sitting out there. And this is the YouTube RUM channel, and you can always go through these with the kids. Lene teaches a ton of classes and has them available on her YouTube. And some of the time she even has her own kids helping her out and doing things. So these are awesome ways. She has tons out here on all different topics, cooking and different things. So those are different ways, different classes that you could have. This one here, So I had made this back when I was page school dean, and some of the different bags that I had shown you earlier from the grab bags or different classes that I taught, I made sure to write it all down, and then I put it in a PDF form so that people can go out there and they can grab it, download it, and print it off. So they just have to gather up their materials and they can do the class themselves, which is definitely helpful. Sometimes people are willing to teach, but they don't know what to teach. So this kind of gives them, hey, you can, you know, look through here and see what you might be interested in and then teach the class. One of the things actually that I think she signed off, yeah, but Elizabeth, one of the things she is actually my special projects deputy. One of the things she's working on is getting more of these from a variety of people. So, because I said, well, there's tons of adults that teach classes. I wonder if there's some way to contact the different adults and say, hey, can you teach, or can you pare your class down so that it is something that can be made into a grab bag, or something that can be in a PDF format for teachers, for youth, so that they can just go there, print it out, and be able to teach that to the kids. Let's see if there's any other ones. This one is just different sources that are out there. So this is the youth tab here on the documents library. And down here where it says activities and games, these are old things that were grabbed from the previous website and they just kind of brought them over. So most of these are like baby board games and seek and finds. So I'm going to have them clean that up a little bit and put more of these things out there so that people can just go to our documents library just to download stuff that they need to teach a class. And I think that is it. Any more questions?
Not by me.
Okay, so that is everything. And if you have any questions, if you need to contact me at all, youth@midrealm.org. So thank you for coming to my class, and contact me if you have any questions.